Hello, everybody. Thanks again for visiting my YouTube channel. This is the place where we discuss the Lord's Recovery Movement of Witness Lee, also known as the local church movement. Well, I wanted to throw something out here, give you a little thoughts on some things I've been thinking about. You know, the Lord's Recovery phenomenon is not unique, strictly speaking, or broadly speaking. You could say it either way, I guess, in the sense of what it is manifesting. And really what the Lord's Recovery is a manifestation of human nature. It is a reflection of human beings and the way they think and the way they emote and the way they make decisions and the way they socialize. This is something we all have to realize. The phenomenon in the Lord's Recovery is a dramatic expression of this, but it is not unique and it is not unusual except in its extremity. It is actually quite common and occurs all around us in all kinds of ways. What am I talking about? I'm simply talking about the way we tend to associate ourselves with people and with causes, begin to believe in those causes and those people. We find a purpose, and what we get involved in becomes organized. And at some point in time, the organization becomes the point. This is what you need to realize. It is no longer the cause. It is no longer the people. It is the movement. It is the organization. As I said, this is not unique to the Lord's Recovery. In fact, I would say almost all churches in the world experience this in some kind of way. When a church gets formed, and I don't care whether it's a local church with local church elders and Lord's Recovery elders, I don't care if it's a street corner church, I don't care if it's any kind of church. We're talking about a practical human organization that is owned by somebody. Somebody has rights to it legally in the sense of human laws. But who really owns the thing? What really is the thing? What is it that you are a part of? And this is the phenomenon that occurs over and over again. And so we often like to say, well, the church is an organism. It's not an organization. Well, a local church is an organization. A practical church is an organization. It cannot not be an organization. It has to be organized. People can't just be expected to show up spontaneously. Speakers have to be planned. You have to have a schedule. You have to have a routine. You have to have certain bylaws or certain expectations. And then there's the legality of it. When push comes to shove, in most societies, the church has certain rights to property and names and this sort of thing. So to say the church is not an organization, you're saying something theoretical and ideal. Yes, the church in general is not an organization. And this is the point, and this is the tension that I want to call your attention to, is the tension between the organic church, which exists, which we've all tasted and experienced and loved very deeply, the body of Christ, the family of God, the relationship between believers, the fellowship of the body of Christ, and the way it practically, inevitably, and unavoidably must be experienced, and that is in some kind of organization. And eventually these organizations come up against something. And it is something that happens again and again. And that thing is that the organization itself becomes the point. Now, if you are a paid pastor or a paid assistant pastor or a worker or a secretary or somebody involved in the church, that organization becomes something important to you, becomes something you rely on, becomes something you have expectations about, and it becomes something you become loyal to. And so inevitably, your calling, which is to serve the body of Christ or to serve other believers, must necessarily come in conflict with the calling to serve the organization. And this is what happens. I've seen it again and again. I'm over 60 years old. I've been in several churches. I was in the Lord's Recovery. I was in a Vineyard church. I've been in an evangelical community church. And in every case, I've noticed one thing, and that is this group, this organization, becomes a priority. Maintaining it, keeping it going, being loyal to it, relying on it for all kinds of things. Financial things, security things, social things, personal things, and spiritual things. It all comes in a package. But ultimately, you might find yourself making compromises for the sake of the organization, which might not be good for the message that you are supposed to be sharing, or some individual or individuals who might be sacrificed for that organization. It happens. It happens over and over and over and over. Now, when the Lord commissioned the church and created the church, surely he saw this. Surely he saw this coming. Surely he understood human nature. He understood our tendency to become attached to a group in the sense of the organization of the group rather than the people. He knew this would happen. We are in this situation. My point is not to say this is bad and there has to be a new way and to try to come up with some cockamamie idea that, oh, we need to do house churches. House churches would just be another organization. Oh, we need to do local churches. Local churches are just an organization. And on and on. You're always going to run up against the same problem. And so what I wanted to bring to light was just that this tension exists and that it's unavoidable. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen to you. And you are going to be caught in the crosshairs of it sooner or later. It's inevitable. It happens in the biggest churches and the biggest organizations, and it happens in the smallest. But there are a couple of things I want to bring out about this. Number one, the people that are closely involved and dependent upon the organization, I'm talking about the people that work there and possibly get paid by it, they are going to have a different set of priorities than you. They just are. I'm talking about your pastor. I'm talking about the people that work there. They view the church differently than you do. You view the church as a place you go to and are part of and participate in. They view the church as something that they are caretakers of and also that they are dependent upon for their finances. That's just a fact. So by definition, they are going to have a different set of priorities than you. That's just the way it is. That's just human nature. I do not believe that there's anybody so pure that they're a pastor of a church and they don't view that church differently than you do when they're getting a check from the church every month. And you're going to view it differently. And so that's just reality. As you're going through life, your Christian life, this seems to be the way things are, and they have been this way for a long time. What the Lord's Recovery tried to do was produce this thing called the local church, which was this entity that existed in the whole city that everybody belonged to, and that was a good idea. But the bad idea was a group of people declaring they were it and their leaders were the leader of it and everybody needed to show up and everybody needed to join them. That was utterly stupid, but that's what we dealt with. So they tried to put the two together in a sense. They tried to eliminate the organizational aspect of it by saying it's a requirement that you meet with the local church. It didn't work. It made matters worse because it basically denied all these factors. And one of the factors was that when you run up against this difference of values, at some point you have to make a decision about what you're going to do and where you're going to be. This is true for the Lord's Recovery churches, and this is true for any church. So surely the Lord knew this. And so what I'm suggesting is that the bottom line is you have to do what you feel is best according to your conscience and leading. If you're in a church and things aren't working out for you and you run up against this, understand it's just part of the package. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen again and again, and people aren't perfect. And hopefully you can join a church where if you have a problem, you can talk about it and bring it to your pastor But if you can't, if that doesn't work, then you have to make a decision about what you're going to do. Like I said, they have their mission, they have their priorities. They don't have a monopoly on God's purpose. But you have to understand that most likely they're doing the best they can. There's no point in holding any resentment. There's no point in anything like that. It's just the way things work. It's like a job. It's like a business that you work for. Sooner or later, you might run into some sort of conflict that you can't resolve. And it's not incumbent upon you to simply knuckle under what you feel like you shouldn't have to put up with. And that's up to each individual. Now, I'm not suggesting church hopping or anything like that. What I am saying is, and this is my final summation of this, is that to me this phenomenon is almost the ultimate indictment of the Lord's Recovery's local ground teaching. Because ultimately the caretakers of a church are going to have a set of values that may be in conflict with what you feel the Lord is telling you to do. And you have a right to follow him. Maybe you'll start another church. And guess what? You'll run up against the same things when you do that. And it'll happen again and again and again and again. And we all have to deal with that, and that's the way it works. And hopefully you can find a home and fellowship where your mission in life can be fulfilled according to God's plan. Don't be resentful. Don't be angry. I mean, I understand being angry at the Lord's Recovery because they took this thing to the nth degree. But just realize God doesn't tie anybody to an organization. The body of Christ, the church, the fellowship between believers, the mutuality, the wonderful sharing of Christ is real and beautiful. But organizations are inevitable. So on your journey, just realize that the most important thing is your relationship between believers. So that's what I wanted to say this time. Thanks for listening. Take care.